Alright, everybody. Hello. This is Andrew here from Central Illinois Weather, back with another video. Today we're going to be talking about potential for a significant severe weather event tomorrow. But before we go into that, we do have severe weather ongoing as we speak. Large enhanced risk across the Carolinas, which is including a chance for a tornado or two, damaging wind gusts, and some very large hail. Very large hail, a tornado or two, and some wind gusts are also possible out in the high plains. This video, though, is mainly going to be talking about tomorrow, where we could see a long-lived, intense MCS, potentially even a derecho, tracking from Colorado and New Mexico as supercells, merging into an upscaling into a complex somewhere in Oklahoma, Panhandle, and southwest Kansas, and moving into Arkansas seems like a fair possibility. Tornadoes are really not going to be too likely with that system, though. Maybe initially in New Mexico and Colorado. The main area for tornadoes tomorrow, though, is going to be South Dakota and Nebraska. Significant wind gusts are likely, though, most likely in that hatched area, and then very large hail is also likely, most likely in that hatched area. And beyond that, we will have a chance for severe weather on Wednesday and Thursday, but we're not going to talk about those in this video. We'll probably talk about those tomorrow. Currently, overlooking the United States, we have a lot of northwest flow. This more intense trough is going to eject over and hit the southern central plains tomorrow. As you can see, it moves further to the north, and it'll bring over some flow over into the southern central plains, and we can see that with the rapid refresh model, which we will look at the RAP really quickly and talk about kind of what the upper level patterns are going to be looking like tomorrow. I feel like the RAP does a pretty good job with the synoptics of events. So here's about 22Z. As we can see here, supercells are probably going to be ongoing with the shortwave in Nebraska and South Dakota. There's also going to be a chance for a supercell event into Wyoming and Colorado tomorrow as well. SPC only has a marginal there, but I would assume it's going to go slight, possibly even enhanced rest with the HRF signal that we have, which I'll show you in a little bit. That MCS complex is going to form over a shortwave that's going to be right here, and it's going to ride the ridge into Arkansas, and it's going to take a pretty erratic movement, and you can see this pattern aloft. The little wave of energy, and it dips into the southern central United States. Now we can really look at tomorrow's complex of storms using reflectivity from the RRFS. The RRFS does a pretty good job with these types of systems, so we're going to look at it. This is for the rest of today. Tomorrow, storms are likely going to form along the mountains of the Rockies and New Mexico and Colorado in the late afternoon. As these pass into more lower terrain, a couple intense supercells are likely to evolve in Kansas and Oklahoma. Here's a forecast sounding. This is why tornadoes are very unlikely tomorrow. Temperature spreads of 30 degrees appear likely, but this is going to really cast a spell for damaging wind gusts. Because of this temperature spread, you have inverted V profiles, which mean there's a lot of dry air toward the surface, and it's aiding a decay of 2,000 joules per kilogram, which is one of the key things that sparks damaging wind gust threat, along with steep lapse rates, which you can see as the thermal profile goes bigger. The hodograph for tomorrow is going to be very favorable for very large hail, given that it's rather straight and long. As we can see here, upscale growth into a cluster is likely across southern Kansas and northern Oklahoma, and ahead of this line you can see lots of instability, and that dry air toward the surface is still going to be there. This is going to kind of spark the potential for an MCS, and it's probably going to continue all the way into Mississippi, Tennessee, Arkansas tomorrow, and it'll ride that gradient. Now let's go to about 21Z and show you the gradient. So the RRFS has that gradient a slight bit further to the north. So the MCS track, it would start as supercells here, and it would be an MCS probably like that, and just ride this gradient further to the south. Something like that could happen. But this gradient's probably going to be moving north, so edge that a little bit further to the north. As we go into the southern central plains for tomorrow, and go into that setup here, we can see lots of theta E. It's going to be present. Actually, I'm going to move further north for this sector on that one. And supercells are likely to initiate in the afternoon hours. And ahead of these supercells, profiles favorable for large hail appear likely, potentially even very large hail. As we get toward the evening, some of the RRFS suggests that these supercells weaken, and that's probably because of some subsidence noted in the middle levels here, and a stable layer that really caps things off. Now, it does fire several supercells out in Wyoming, and this solution is definitely possible, but there is some substance they have to deal with. Any storms that fire will likely produce large to very large hail given the straight hodograph and moderate thermodynamics. And the storms in Wyoming are firing off of a little shortwave at 500 millibars. You can see right here, as we go up to 700 millibars, you can see that shortwave is a little bit more defined. Moving into the evening hours, these grow into a little bit more of a cluster, and they move to the east. There's also more storms that fire over portions of Nebraska overnight as the Wyoming storms weaken. These will be mainly hail producers as the low-level thermals are not supported for tornadoes. Now let's look in what the HRRR has to say for the event. We're going to start in the Central Plains here, and we're going to go up into areas further to the north. So starting with the Central Plains, you can see today there could be a supercell or two. Actually, there are a supercell or two. Storms likely to fire around 21Z southwest Kansas. The HRRR is probably a tad too fast, but you can see again an environment favorable for very large hail and significant wind gusts. The HRRR, also initiates several supercells in Nebraska, and we'll look at that environment right now. As the environment there's a stable layer in the low levels, so tornado potential is probably going to be very low, but there probably will be some massive hail because of this very straight and long hodograph combined with some thermodynamics, which are solid enough given the temperature cooling rapidly with height. And of course, the environment further to the south is fuel for a strong MCS, and you can see that the HRRR really does resolve a stronger MCS, and it kind of moves further to the east and goes into Missouri even with some strong severe potential in more central Missouri, and that'll go into the Tennessee River Valley eventually. Now here's what the HREF has to say for this severe weather event. You can see it's going to be mainly fed off this upper level flow. And we're going to look at 4-kilometer vertical helicity because this is going to really tell us what's going to happen. So, middle of the afternoon, looks like around 20 to 20, or in between that 18 and 21Z time frame, supercells are expected to initiate somewhere in that general region there. Also, they're expected to initiate in Wyoming into Nebraska as well. As we get toward the evening hours, there's signal for a couple more robust supercells across Wyoming and also across the Oklahoma-Texas Panhandle area. As we get further into the night, the signal for an MCS really starts to increase as we get into portions of Oklahoma and Kansas and Arkansas, and then the signal really diminishes as we get into the early morning hours as the MCS weakens. Looking at the parameters ahead of this ahead of this cluster, let's go to the Southern Plains. So looking at the parameters, this is going to be 0Z. You can see these storms are going to be entering an environment characteristic by 3,000 to 4,000 joules per kilogram of MU CAPE, which is rather extreme values. Even upwards of 4,500 to 5,000 there in north central Oklahoma as the storms kind of eat them up. And then we can see here they kind of keep riding, and that instability grows a little bit lighter as we get into the morning. So the storms are probably going to weaken as they get into Arkansas and Mississippi. Further to the north, we can see storms are likely to fire with a moderate amount of stability, anywhere between 1,000 to 2,000 joules per kilogram of CAPE, and they're probably going to continue potentially even into Iowa, where there's still going to be modest instability overnight. The SREF, we're going to look at its severe thunderstorm calibrated probabilities. So it's suggesting that severe weather potential is going to grow across portions of the southern plains or southern Gulf Coast, and then it'll really start to kick up anywhere between really Wyoming into kind of the Oklahoma, Texas area. So a large area starts to kick up, and we see a couple more focused zones evolve, and as it moves to the east, it kind of wears off a little bit. So that's kind of what the SREF is showing. For the tornado ingredients parameter, values aren't too high. The highest values are actually in Nebraska and South Dakota, right over that SPC 2% area. But but they do grow into Nebraska and Kansas overnight. And then the next day, they're focused across Iowa and Minnesota. And then the day after that, they're focused across Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia, Tennessee, that area. Well, thanks for watching, guys, for this little quick weather update for tomorrow and a couple days into the future. If you want to see more content, subscribe and like.